What is up, Viego mains? Patch 12.17 is upon us, and I'm going to give you all my thoughts on builds, runes, where I think Viego is going to place in the meta in this patch, and also my thoughts on the very new skin, King Viego. Let's get right into it. So this patch consists mostly of champion changes, and there are some champions that I want to go over, because they directly affect Viego and his matchups, so I will go over them real fast. First, Graves is a champion who has not been very good for a while, but is always actually very strong versus Viego. Personally, Graves used to be my permaban because when he was strong, it just felt impossible to play against him. Basically, Graves is impossible to invade. He is always at full HP, and his E gives him too much armor for Viego to ever kill him. Graves can outfarm you, outscale you, and basically out-teamfight you in most cases if he gets ahead. But Graves is so weak right now that he can't do those things. So me seeing a Graves buff is honestly quite sad. I wish that he wasn't getting buffed. However, it is what it is, and hopefully this doesn't make him too high of a priority pick, as I would hate to see that. Okay, Hecarim is getting a massive rework. This is not going to be a guide on all the things that are happening to Hecarim, but basically, he is going to be getting stronger. They say it's an adjustment, but honestly, every Hecarim main I've talked to has just said that it's a straight-up buff. And the thing about Hecarim is that this matchup versus Viego has always been pretty even. Basically, Hecarim dominates the early game and can just completely out-tempo you early. However, after you get Blade of the Ruined King and usually one or two more items, you can outscale Hecarim, because Hecarim's scaling is not that great. So basically, in my opinion, I think that the matchup will probably still end up being the same. It seems like Hecarim is incentivized to actually build more damage items than tanky ones, which is good because at a certain point, Hecarim just gets destroyed by Viego, especially if you have the right items. So I think this matchup is one that you're going to be seeing a lot more. Hecarim's probably going to be pick or ban in this patch. So, you know, maybe he'll be too much to deal with and we'll have to swap our ban over to Hecarim. Or maybe it'll be a fun matchup where it's just the better player wins that game. So, we'll see. I actually look forward to the Hecarim buffs because I like this matchup, personally. The other matchup is going to be Trundle that I want to highlight, because Trundle is actually one of Viego's biggest counters, as Trundle basically just destroys you early game and mid game, and if you are the only melee champion on your team, or one of the only frontline champions on your team, Trundle will just ult you and make it impossible for you to do anything. Even if you're not playing frontline, if you go for flanks and team fights, he can just turn around, press his R on you, and you basically just get immediately one-shot because it takes all your armor and magic resist away. So in my opinion, Trundle has always been one of the more difficult matchups for Viego. Now, this nerf of his is honestly not that big of a deal. He is basically just getting 3 seconds off his W at level 1, which he doesn't max until 2nd. So technically it does, give you a little bit more room to play around him, but in reality, you're never going to be 1v1ing Trundle unless you're super far ahead. And all I hope with this buff is that this nerf is that Trundle just isn't picked as much. Sometimes nerfs, they might not actually do anything, but they just incentivize people to not play them, even though the nerfs aren't that big of a deal. So honestly, that's just what I hope in this case happens. Now, the most important thing for this current patch is going to be what they are doing to Stopwatch and Zhonya's. So as many of you guys may be aware, if you are an avid Viego player, Stopwatch and Zhonya's are honestly the bane of Viego's existence. You can, full combo somebody, go for the ultimate, about to kill them with the possession, and boom, they stopwatch. Basically rendering your entire combo useless and, ruining everything, basically. Its cost is getting increased by 100 gold, so stopwatch is 750 gold. 750 gold is actually pretty expensive for stopwatch. It may delay people from purchasing it a little bit. Sometimes people only buy stopwatch when they have a perfect buy for it, so this makes it a little more difficult for people to buy it. However, you can't really stop people from getting stopwatch, but in addition to that, Zhonya's is being increased by 400 gold in its cost. Now, it does get more armor and more ability power, so a lot of people are saying that this is a buff, but the reality is that the most annoying thing about Zhonya's is how it's always been such a cheap item. It's 2,600 gold. I mean, you could like shit on a minion wave like a couple times and have 2,600 gold. Like, you get this item super fast. And now that it's 3,000 gold, it makes it a lot more difficult for people to just go stopwatch, use stopwatch, and then immediately back and get Zhonya's. Now it's probably going to be a little more difficult for people to go from stopwatch into Zhonya's. More room for you to take advantage of that. And honestly, people are probably going to consider this to be a buff, but in my humble opinion, I think that this is actually more of a nerf. Mostly just because it will take longer for people to get to these Zhonya's Hourglass power spikes, in which Viego can take big advantage over. So that is kind of how I see the Zhonya's changes. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's now talk about the best builds for Viego on patch 12.17. So basically, I'm going to be recommending 2 builds as opposed to the 3, 4, or more that I sometimes recommend, because I really only think there are 2 viable builds right now for Viego. Now, the first one is going to be a Kraken Slayer build. So the core items are going to be Bork into Kraken Slayer into Death Dance. Now, realistically, you can only assume that you're going to get 3 items in most games. However, if you, it's one of those games where you go 4 items or 5 items, then you can either go some variation of any of the items after Death Dance. You can go Maw, GAs, Zhonya's even. I'm a big fan of Zhonya's over GA personally, but that's just kind of a niche pick of mine. Black Cleaver is a good option, Lord Dom's, Wit's End, any of these items are good. The reason why I suggest this build is because at 2 items, you do so much damage. You can pretty much one-shot or 1v1 any champion that you're even with, because Bork and Kraken Slayer just give you an insane amount of damage, especially if you're able to hit someone with your W. I know a lot of people ask me all the time, can I build Kraken Slayer? Do I have to build Divine Sunder? Do I have to build Frostfire? Can I just build Kraken? It's my favorite. The answer is yes, you can build Kraken Slayer every single game if you know how to use it. Kraken Slayer, unfortunately though, is the hardest mythic to use out of the ones that are viable, because you are going to be more squishy than the other options, which means that any mistake that you make will be more than likely punished, especially if the enemy is good enough. Obviously, eventually, once you get Death Stance and start building more defensive items, you're a little less squishy, but your first 2 items, Bork and Kraken Slayer, whatever order you end up building them in, you're going to be a glass cannon. So you just have to understand your limits and understand how to play around the items that you have. So that's Kraken Slayer. However, I will say that the mythic that is probably going to reign supreme on this patch is going to be Frostfire Gauntlet. Now, it took me a long time to submit to the Frostfire Gauntlet church, but unfortunately, I have to kneel down and accept that I think Frostfire Gauntlet is the best mythic for Viego currently right now. Now, a lot of people are constantly asking me, why is Frostfire Gauntlet so good? Because Frostfire Gauntlet is super, super gold efficient, and it's super cheap. So you build Blade of the Ruined King, which obviously is the best 1-item power spike for Viego. It's the highest damage power spike, into Frostfire Gauntlet. So by the time you finish Frostfire Gauntlet, you still have a ton of damage from Blade of the Ruined King, and Frostfire Gauntlet basically rounds out your entire build at 2 items for only 2,800 gold, which is insanely cheap for a mythic. It's 600 gold cheaper than Kraken Slayer. It gives you a surprising amount of damage, utility in the slow. It gives you a good clear with Balmy Cinder, as well as just an insane amount of tanky stats. The mythic passive is incredible, giving you 100 extra HP per item. So Frostfire Gauntlet all around is just super, super viable. And the best part about it is that after you build Frostfire Gauntlet, that on top of Death Stance makes you just basically like a full tank that can one-shot people. Or you could even go, if you don't necessarily need Death Stance, you can go Black Cleaver third, and then all of a sudden you're just shredding people, whilst also having 3,500 HP, which is insane. Now, the one question I will answer is why Frostfire Gauntlet over Sunfire? A lot of people ask me, Sunfire is like one of the most popular items in the game on Bruiser Champions. Why is it not good on Viego? The one very simple reason why Sunfire is not as good as Frostfire Gauntlet on Viego is because when Viego takes a possession, you lose your Sunfire stacks. So Sunfire builds up stacks while you're in combat, which makes it do increased damage at max stacks. And if you take a possession and you leave that possession, you no longer have your stacks of Sunfire. So basically the value you get out of Sunfire is much less than a lot of other champions, because as the course of the fight goes on, for most people when they have Sunfire, the Sunfire just keeps ramping and doing a ton of damage throughout the fight, whereas Viego has to just keep building it up as he leaves possession. So it's not as good as Frostfire. Also, it's more expensive, so it just is not the best option for Viego. If you don't believe me with Frostfire Gauntlet, just go look up the win rates of the mythics. Currently, Frostfire Gauntlet is the highest win rate mythic, and there is a good reason for it. So that is my recommendation. All right, now I'm briefly going to go over the rune pages that I think are going to be viable for this patch. These didn't really change that much, but I will go over them briefly. So this is the standard rune page that I run in most games, even if I run Frostfire Gauntlet. The reason I like this rune page is mostly just because of this rune right here, Treasure Hunter. I value Treasure Hunter super highly because basically, you can get your Blade of the Ruined King 550 gold sooner, which Blade of the Ruined King itself is a snowball item. So being able to get a snowball item 550 gold sooner, especially in the early game, allows you to have a window to do so much more. A lot of people heavily underestimate how much value Treasure Hunter has, and the value of getting such a huge power spike 1 or 2 minutes sooner. And honestly, I find so much success with this rune page. I personally love it. Also, of course, take tenacity if you need it. But a lot of people may say that this rune page is not as good as, say, the second rune page option, which is conditioning and revitalize, or conditioning unflinching. So I think that this rune page is perfectly viable. Conditioning scales very well with Frostfire Gauntlet because you're building a lot of armor and magic resist, and conditioning scales off of the bonus resistances you build. And obviously Revitalize and Unflinching both are super valuable to Viego due to his healing, and obviously if you're against heavy CC. So I would say either of these are good. Me personally as a player, my entire playstyle is getting early leads and snowballing them as fast as I possibly can. I believe that's the best playstyle for Viego, which is why I personally run this. But, you know, if you're not as confident in your ability to take a lead and snowball it super fast and super quickly, then obviously Resolve is good. I don't like taking Magical Footwear, Cosmic Insight. I think that this is the most overrated combo of runes in the entire game, especially for Viego. Basically, this gives you 300 gold for free, whereas Treasure Hunter gives you 550. And also, sometimes it's important for you to get boots early instead of waiting 9 to 12 minutes for your boots. So I think that the boots is an overrated aspect, and also Cosmic Insight. I don't think that this is any more valuable than, you know, Sudden Impact. Sudden Impact, some games will give me like 2,000 extra damage, something crazy. Whereas, you know, this gives me 50 seconds reduced on my flash, which just means absolutely nothing to me, really. I'm not, ooh, challenge, tear up. I'm not a big fan of Inspiration at all. Call me a hater. I am one, so. All right, and the thing that we are almost looking forward to on patch 12.17 is the King Viego skin. I have heard a lot of mixed opinions on the skin. Some people say that it's kind of low quality. Some people actually completely love it. Me personally, I like it a lot. I think the idea of a lore skin is really sick. I think that Viego, you know, he has a basic design, and while I would love a $20 legendary skin that just makes him look super badass, I think that this is a skin that was, you know, destined to happen and looks very good in my opinion. I really like the swords, the sound effects, the mist is awesome, and I think Viego just looks good in general. I think I'm definitely going to be running this skin at least for, you know, a couple weeks exclusively, so I'm a big fan of it. Let me know what you guys think of the skin in the comments, but it's coming and it's here, so, you know, it's a good patch for Viego. Even though we didn't get any buffs, we did get a skin, so we'll take what we can get. And with that being said, thank you guys for watching. That is going to conclude my patch 12.17 rundown. I hope you guys learned something, or at least are confident in the information that I've given you. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do these every single patch, so if you want constant updates on Viego, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I also post tons of Viego gameplay and pretty much have an entire Viego-centric YouTube channel, so if you're into Viego, this is the place for you. I hope you guys enjoy. Much love. Peace out, and good luck on the Rift in patch 12.17.